We face an enemy that is ever growing.
Imagine sitting inside a room with the most powerful man in America. Across the table is the most powerful man in the Soviet Union. Outside that room, two superpowers are watching, and somewhere in the background are thousands of nuclear weapons. Now imagine being told that the fate of millions of people could depend on what these two men say to each other next. That is the setup for the Brink of War. The story takes us back to 1986, right in the middle of the Cold War. America and the Soviet Union weren't simply political rivals. They were two nuclear superpowers constantly watching each other, preparing for the possibility that the next crisis could become something much worse. And then comes the meeting. Ronald Reagan meets Mikhail Gorbachev in Iceland. At first it sounds simple: talk, negotiate, find common ground. But there is one enormous problem. Neither man can afford to look weak, and neither man can completely trust the other. That's where this movie gets interesting. Because instead of giving us a typical action-packed political thriller, the film turns a conversation into a battlefield. There are no bullets flying across the room. The weapons are words. A pause can be a threat. A question can be a trap. And a single sentence can destroy hours of progress. Jeff Daniels plays Reagan, while Jared Harris takes on the role of Gorbachev. And what makes their performances work is the contrast between them. They aren't simply two historical figures delivering famous speeches. They feel like two men trying to understand what the other side actually wants. Reagan wants to protect American interests. Gorbachev wants to protect the Soviet Union. But both men also understand something terrifying. If negotiations completely collapse, the consequences could go far beyond politics. And that's when the movie starts asking a much bigger question. What happens when winning isn't enough? What if both sides can technically win the argument and still lose everything? That idea gives the negotiations their real tension. They make progress, and then something threatens to destroy it. One side pushes harder, the other side pulls back, and suddenly the entire meeting feels like it's balancing on a knife's edge. If you're enjoying this kind of cinematic movie breakdown, hit subscribe. It takes just a second, and it helps us bring more movie stories like this to the channel. Now, one thing that makes The Brink of War different is that it doesn't need constant action to create suspense. The tension comes from uncertainty. You know these characters have enormous power, you know the world is watching, but you don't know which conversation will finally break the deal. And the more they negotiate, the more you realize that diplomacy isn't about getting everything you want. Sometimes it's about deciding what you can live without. The movie also gives us glimpses into the personal side of these leaders, because behind the political titles are human beings dealing with pressure, expectations, family, and the fear of making the wrong decision. Those moments aren't always as powerful as the main negotiations, but they help remind us that history isn't created by machines. It's created by people. People who make choices, people who take risks, and sometimes people who have to trust an enemy because there's no other path forward. That's probably the most powerful idea in the movie. Two countries can spend years preparing for confrontation, but eventually somebody has to sit down and say, let's talk. And that doesn't mean the danger disappears. It means both sides are finally willing to take the first step away from it. The Brink of War may not be the kind of movie you watch for explosions or nonstop action. Its battlefield's a conference room. Its suspense comes from dialogue. And its biggest question is painfully simple. Can two enemies trust each other long enough to prevent the world from reaching the point of no return? That's what makes this story worth watching. Because sometimes, the most dangerous movie scene isn't the one where a bomb explodes. It's the scene where everyone is sitting completely still, waiting for one person to make the next move. So, would you watch The Brink of War? And if you've already seen it, tell me this. Do you think enemies can genuinely find common ground when the stakes are this high? Drop your thoughts in the comments.